too, and I have to tell you, Sean O'Malley is a very good fighter. Okay, ding, ding, ding. Who's not? Sean O'Malley has a very good record. Okay, who in the top 5 of any division doesn't? Sean O'Malley is a creative genius who finds a way to separate himself from the pack. And whether he does that through dress, whether he does that through association, whether he does that on Instagram through making videos where he's on one leg because he had a bum knee, and I'm going back about 18 months ago, but he's doing a workout out by the pool with his mitt coach. I mean, there's something about him that's very interesting. Sean O'Malley's the first guy in the history of the sport, any organization, to cut his post-fight interview flat on his back with Joe Rogan kneeling by his side. I mean, there's a way that you can use a moment. And I'll look back at many of the other greats, and you can beg a guy who's on his way up and trying to separate himself from the pack, trying to make sure that his story is the story that gets told and gets listened to and resonates with the fan. You can try to do that, but the very first thing you have to do is to make sure that that individual understands the value in telling a good story and the value within this sport and industry of separating yourself from the pack. As simple as that may sound, Chad, I'm telling you, a lot of guys don't even know that that needs to be a goal that they go out and do. Now, once you identify that that is something I want to do, you have the bigger question of how do I do it, right? I mean, you can read all the business books you want. There's really 3 steps to business. You have an idea, you have funding, and you have execution. The reason I bring that up is much like people that want to be some jerk because they read a book that Warren Buffett wrote about the stock market, and they'll tell you buy low and sell high and try to sound like the smart guy in the room. That's really not a great idea. What's wrong with buying high and selling higher? The answer is there's nothing wrong with it. It just isn't your factory answer. And I tie this into Sean O'Malley because I do like what Sean is doing with his career, which is I'm healthy now, I'm licensed now, and I want to fight the top guys right now. I don't like the idea that we need to hold Sean back because he has some kind of star factor. I do believe that he has star factor. I just am seeing a guy with a tremendous shelf life. I think he's got another decade in him. I think he might be the John Jones of that weight class. I don't see anything right now stopping him, and I could give you a most recent example of his fight with Weiland. Weiland is nobody's fool, has never been anybody's fool, has been a top contender and a champion himself for a meaningful period of time, and much like many other guys that tried to test a fisticuffs with Sean O'Malley, he couldn't make it outside of 5 minutes. And when you start talking about a guy's age and his youthfulness, Sean at right around 25, 26 years old, you look at his youthfulness, what you're really talking about as an athlete is that you do naturally get stronger. Some of that man strength is just naturally going to come in as you get to 30. And now we're even seeing athletes going closer to 32, 34, and 36 years old before they're reaching this physical peak and prime. That's really the only benefit that you get. And yes, there's something to be said for strength, but how many damn seconds do you want Sean O'Malley to knock somebody out for? He knocks that guy out for 1 second, the referee's going to stop the fight. Who is here arguing, telling Sean that he needs to go slow and hold him back a little bit so that he can get some of this strength? So he can leave the guy out cold for 9 and 10 and 11 seconds? 1 second will do. Newsflash to the world, Sean O'Malley is strong enough right now. If Sean O'Malley is willing enough, and he is ready enough, I say put him in. There is a responsibility when you have with a guy who is dynamic like Sean O'Malley, who is starching people, who is leaving them face down and embarrassed, getting stretchered out of the ring. You have a responsibility to put him in there with top guys like Weiland, in all fairness. With world championship caliber guys like Garbrandt, by example, like Aldo, by example, like Jan, by example. Like Sterling, like Sandhagen. Yes, I still believe Sandhagen's a top guy, and 40 seconds of action isn't going to change my mind on that. I'm just sharing with you, when you're having these conversations about the best guys in the world at 135 pounds, you have to throw O'Malley in. Oh, and by the way, there's a second storyline to this, which is this kid is getting ready to light things on fire. And if you think that that champ narrative that's floating around the industry right now isn't very much in a young Sean O'Malley's mind, you're wrong. He's in a race to get that 135-pound strap so that he can leave it and go get that 145-pound strap. He might even go after the 55-pound strap. That's the only difference. Is up on Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley versus Eddie Weiland. I mean, I can give you the X's and O's of the fights, guys, but it is far less significant. Okay, it's far less significant as the story going into this fight. Eddie Weiland is nobody's fool. He is the Cub Swanson of that weight class. Yeah, you can draw them and maybe you can even get your hand raised, but it's not going to be a fun night. Nobody wants that call. Somebody's got to go do it. Okay, well, Sean's coming to this fight. Borderline arrogant? Is that too far? Definitely cocky. Confident. I will tell you this. That was a beating. I mean, he came out and he did what he does. Here's the deal with O'Malley. Okay, let me get my thoughts together, guys. I just watched this. The deal with O'Malley, whenever you're a flashy guy, whenever you're the guy that goes out and gets the oohs and the ahs from the crowd, that is going to take you a long way. Now, at his age of 22, he's got a decade before we even need to start having this conversation. He's not going to slow down, just naturally. He's not going to slow down. He's going to get to 32, 33, does everything right, good nutrition, 34, before this conversation even comes in. But when you have a guy who gets the oohs and the ahs, from the Anderson Silvas to the Roy Joneses, to the Chuck Liddells, you're going to have a ton of fun until you don't. And the only thing that beats the flash is the basics. Eddie Weiland brings the basics to the table. This was a hard fight going in. When you're Sugar Sean, a lot of those oohs and ahs, and again, the guys I coupled him with, I mean, that's good company, right? No insult being compared to Roy Jones, because Anderson Silva, Chuck Liddell, there's no way to take that as an insult. It's just a real thing that at some point, because of the way you fight, and because you break the very basic rule number 1 of hands up and chin down, when you do that, you're going to deal with a sharpshooter who follows the basics, who keeps his hands up, and who throws straight punches, and eventually he's going to catch you. I thought in many ways, in conjunction with the appearance of overlooking Weiland by Sugar Sean, I thought there was some room that was going to be tonight. Now, I was picking Sugar Sean. Welcome to the Sugar Show, right? I'm part of the show. I'm on board. Welcome to the Sugar Show. But I was predicting that whether he fell down and ultimately went to sleep and was embarrassed, or he just got a reminder that, hey, at a high level, when you're fighting former contenders and former world champions, you're going to get clipped. Knock it off. I thought that was going to be a very reasonable prediction by me, even a responsible prediction by me. Wrong. Not even close. Sugar Sean did what Sugar Sean does. He went on there as calm and cocky and confident as can be. He had the cool hair. He had who was in the building paying him full attention. Whether that was a cameraman or that was Dana himself. Everybody that was in the room looking to see what he's going to do. He went out there and performed, put Weiland down. I mean, I've never seen anybody clean Weiland up. Ever. I've been with Eddie since, from the WEC days. I'd never seen him get cleaned up before. Not a commentary on Eddie at all. When you fight a guy who has range, who knows how to use his range, okay, we will always talk to you, the audience. We'll almost condescend to you about the reach advantage. But you'll never hear anybody in the history of fight analysis tell you what in the hell that means. And they don't tell you what it means because there's only 2 guys ever that know how to use their reach. John Jones of current time, Tommy Hearns of yesteryear. Only 2 guys with long arms that knew how to use them and keep a guy at bay. Now you got 3. Now you got Sugar Sean. Welcome. I see that Sean O'Malley called out Cody Garbrandt. Now, I like that for a plethora of reasons. Number 1, Sean O'Malley was very on brand, and that means Sean O'Malley's brand in the way he called Cody out. As a matter of fact, he told Cody that Cody is getting better. He complimented Cody. Okay, when a younger guy compliments an older guy in any walk of society, there's something condescending about it. But guys, it's a call out. It can't just be all moonlight and canoes. There has to be a dig. That was one of the digs. He let Cody know that in his own assessment watching Cody is actually getting better. Okay, that's wonderful. You have my attention. Cody's a former champion of the world. And by the way, they fought on the same card. O'Malley opened the show. Garbrandt was co-main event. So it's a very condescending place, but it's also a very good call-out. I'd love to see that match. For many reasons, I'd love to see that match. I think that's going to be possibly a hard one for O'Malley to get if you were to just go by the rankings. I've never bought into the idea fully. Perhaps I should. I never bought fully into the assertion that the winner of Aljo and Sandhagen would be the one to fight the winner of Aldo and Jan. And the only reason I didn't buy into it is because within that same card, you had the same weight class. That was Cody versus a Sun Tzu. However, that weight class was 2 matches later. You don't put your feature match earlier. You might have to if it's a feature match for said weight class. This was the same weight class, so I never fully bought into that. Not to mention Garbrandt's a former world champion, and he's a star. He is. Garbrandt's just a star. Now, I do think that Aljo and Sandhagen, to get both, deserve an opportunity, if you want to use the word deserve. But at some point, a decision has to be made. I don't know how much I bought into that. It may end up playing out that way. If it does, Garbrandt's going to be looking for something to do. The other smart thing about Sean calling out Cody is Cody gets pissed off fast. You could upset Garbrandt and have to fight Garbrandt in the gym. You guys ever seen The Ultimate Fighter? Ask Conor McGregor how easy it is to upset Cody Garbrandt. You guys ever seen the training footage of Jean-Claude Van Damme letting one go, landed on Cody's face? Okay. Garbrandt gets pissed off fast. I first heard about Cody before I'd ever met him, and before he was even a signed fighter. I heard about him from Uriah Faber, who was telling me over the telephone, hey man, I got this guy in my gym. This guy's going to be the champion. Well, tell me about the guy. How come I haven't heard of him? He hasn't got his shot yet. He's a young guy, but this guy's going to be the champion. And then Uriah told me later, a number of months, again, talking to him on the phone, he goes, hey man, don't piss off Cody unless you want to fight Cody. So the only reason I bring that to you, that little inside baseball, if you will, if you call out Cody Garbrandt, you're probably going to be fighting Cody Garbrandt. And I could think of an exception to that, which would be if Cody was to go on and fight for a championship. But based on what we've been told as of now, that's not the case. It's going to be Aljo. So regardless of if I want to buy it or not, I'm just saying there's a few moving parts here. And I think it was very smart by Sean O'Malley. It was also not something necessarily that Cody could get too bothered at if he saw him in the back, let's say, because he was complimenting him. Even if it was backhanded as all hell. I mean, look, as far as call-outs go, it was very fun. And I do have to mention one other thing, which was less than a week ago, Sean O'Malley came out and said, I'm not going to fight harder guys unless the UFC wants to pay. There was a little bit of a misunderstanding there, perhaps by me, but I interpreted that to mean they're going to have to pay an opponent more money. Some people thought Sean was joining the bandwagon of pay me more money. Either way that it goes, apparently he didn't mean it. Because he's now calling out Garbrandt. Don't act like Garbrandt's somebody's fool. Let's talk a little Sugar Sean, because there's a few moving parts here, and I'm very curious. I mean, first off, I like the Sugar Show. I think that you guys do too. Sean drew Thomas Almeida. You're probably not overly familiar with Almeida. He's on a 3-fight losing streak, and he hasn't been extremely busy lately. Even if you go look at those 3 losses he had, they're spread out. So it would appear, okay, if a guy's hurt in Sugar Sean, if a guy's coming off his loss, it would appear maybe he got a little bit of help in the booking department, but he's still got to go and deal with this task, and it's not going to be physical, it's mental, and I am curious. Sugar Sean has his first defeat, okay? I'm backing you up to his last fight. He has his first defeat. How is he going to handle that? One thing that happens when you're undefeated, and it can even be 0-0. I went through this experience. I was completely undefeated, but I'd never done it before. I only know what my mind was telling me, right? If I was to personalize this, which is I'm invincible. I can beat anybody. I've seen this on TV, and I can beat all these guys. You actually got in there one time, and all of a sudden your reality has changed. And I bring that to you because Sean likely believed he could beat anybody. He had beaten everybody. He likely believed nobody could beat him. Nobody had beaten him. So what does that one loss mean, if anything? But this is the question. What does it mean? And he's only got 2 options. Sugar Sean can go into this fight and say, that has nothing to do with anything, and I'm going to deal with the task at hand of the person in front of me tonight. Or he can go in there all puckered up, wondering and worrying, is this going to happen again? You will see this a lot, and you'll hear this narrative a lot. More so in boxing than you do in MMA. About a guy who suffers his first knockout, and he's never the same again. It isn't the physicality of the knockout. Something didn't happen in that moment that reduced him as a fighter. What happens the next time he comes into the ring is he's gun shy, and he knows that can happen. He didn't know it before. He gained power in the naiveness. He gained power in what he didn't know. So then the boxer goes in, and all of a sudden he's slow, he's gun shy, he's throwing punches out much slower because he's using his hands for protection. Anytime they leave to attack, his protections are gone, and he knows that he needs to be protected. It makes him slow. It's what makes him get knocked out again. You see a boxer, a great career, gets knocked out, all of a sudden he gets knocked out 3 more times. And people will always trace it back and go, well, yeah, you know, once you get knocked out once, you're never the same. Your chin's never the same. That is not true. It is not a physicality. It's a mentality. And I'm just wondering, where will Sean be? Because as I watched Sean from a distance, he handled that loss perfectly. There was a part of him that denied that it happened because he had the leg injury, and we shouldn't even count this one. Okay. I mean, you got to control what you let into your bubble. He wants to keep that out of his bubble. Okay. I thought he was a sportsman about it. I thought he was a gentleman about it, but I also saw the competitor in him where he's denying that it's even a real thing or that it existed. And that's very true because you're looking at him. Not how do you guys judge it from a PR perspective. I'm talking about what he lets into his bubble. Conor McGregor never accepted that Khabib was champion. The night that Khabib beat Conor and left with the belt. Conor said he's not champion because of the antics that happened in the ring. He was not crowned. The ceremony did not take place. Now, that is a stretch, but Conor's letting us into his mindset. I loved it. I thought that it was fascinating. So Sean's denial that that's even a loss is an interesting thing because he's letting you into what he believes. I do feel as though this is the question, though. Is he going to be able to let that go, not be gun shy, go out there and compete? Or is he going to be like some boxers that we've seen throughout history where that first one, you never let it go? Johnny Walker, fine example, to use a name that you guys are familiar with and more recent in MMA. As soon as that first one came, boy, it was dominoes. So for me, that's what Sean is up against. I don't know that I need to give an X's and O's breakdown of Sugar Sean versus Thomas Almeida because I don't think that's what this fight is about. Has Sean let that go? Is he mature enough, even at his young age, to know the importance of letting it go? You don't get to bring... Did you guys happen to see this? So, Sugar Sean O'Malley goes out over the weekend and enters a grappling tournament. It looked to me like it was an IBJJF, forget who the sanctioning body was, not totally relevant, but it is relevant that it was a tournament, meaning you show up, you put down your entry fee, and you go against whoever they put on the mat with you. Now, there's just a couple of things that I love about this, okay? First off, Sean O'Malley just got his foot hurt. Very relevant to the story. People don't really know where he's at with his training. Secondly, if you're Sean O'Malley and you go put it on the line, even at a little side tournament on Saturday, you just did a lot of things for a lot of people that aren't named Sean O'Malley. I mean, it's a very selfless act. And even though he's trying to get some experience. Yeah, sure, he's trying to go out there and compete. I understand that, but you just helped that event. You just gave a major thrill to whoever you got on the mat with. X's and O's of the match. And I got very nervous watching this, right? Because Sean's got the hurt foot. And we don't know how badly that foot is hurt, but we can all acknowledge he's got a hurt foot. Okay, well, his opponent goes right for the foot. They end up on the ground, and they're scrambling, and they're rolling around, and I was very impressed with Sean's defense, by the way. Like, there's some positions in jiu-jitsu that you simply aren't going to know where you are. You are simply going to be lost unless you have spent an enormous amount of time working, training, drilling, and executing some of these defenses. So they're going around and around, and Sean's doing everything right, and it's a scramble, but ultimately the guy gets to the foot. Now, I'm watching this go, Sean, tap. I don't care if he has it. That's not what this is about. This gold medal at this tournament, it's about practice. It's about getting a workout in. It's about competing. It's about showing up. It's about bouncing back. These are all wonderful things. But it is not win at all cost. It is compete at all cost when you're in Sean's spot. So the guy started to get it a little deeper, and Sean did have to say, okay, you got me here. But it was just a really cool thing. I mean, it's a very special thing. Imagine you're a spectator at that event. You're largely not there because that's something you want to do, right? I'm a grappling guy. I grew up grappling. I also understood why we grappled in front of next to nobody. Unless you understand and appreciate the sport, or unless you have a storyline as to why this specific matches taking place, there's just not a whole lot to see there. So imagine you're a spectator, you showed up, and all of a sudden Sugar Sean walks on the mat. I can guarantee you nobody patted him on the back and thanked him. I can guarantee you the event organizer never patted him on the back and gave him a t-shirt. They just treated him like everybody else. And that's fine, but I think that Sean does deserve something a little bit more. And I also think that there's a message. Look, there's some guys that just do things right, and you can be very jealous of those guys. Normal human emotion, whether we want to admit it or not. That's a very normal thing. But there's also guys that you can then identify and copy. The fact that Sean O'Malley went out there for nothing, told nobody. This wasn't a social media play or, hey, look at me, I'm trying to get better. He just entered a tournament. There's a tournament, he went and entered the tournament. He gets in a precarious position with a foot that is damaged. He surrenders to the opponent. He gets up like a man. He shakes hands. He walks off, and then he comes back and does it again against the next opponent. It's just a very cool thing. It's a cool thing. It went under the radar, and I wanted to bring it to your guys' attention. The video is out there. I want to say maybe I saw it on Instagram. I would trust that his opponent, who was able to now say I competed with Sean O'Malley, or the opponent's father. I mean, I would imagine who posted it, but fair game to them. Absolutely. Absolutely, that guy should be proud of himself. Probably a very scary thing to do. Not to mention the guy went out there with a pretty good strategy. You're taking on a guy who's got a bum wheel, go attack the wheel. Great, fair play to that guy, but I would like to tip my hat just to the participation, just for the willingness, just for the pure love of the sport, man. When you get bit by the bug and it's that competitive bug, there's only one way to scratch that itch, and it's to go out there and compete. Do you really want? How much credit do you really need? Fair question by me. You got the pay, you got double the pay because you won. Win show. You're moving up. I mean, if Cheeto was just a co-main event, you don't get to win the fight and then slide down on a card. It just doesn't work that way. His next fight, he will be either a co-main event or a main event. That's a broad stroke term. It depends on the card. I understand some stuff like that. Great spot. How much credit does it? Now he needs to come out because you, the people, we, the people, are putting him in the spot? What spot? You go into a cage in a sport that is judged based on damage. Two guys go in there healthy, one guy gets injured, and it's not you. I mean, aren't we kind of done here? Do we have to make him prove the legitimacy? I mean, it just seems like one of these really baffling conversations. Even as I'm talking to you guys about it now, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard rhetorically. It does come back to 7 and 5 is the same number as 5 and 7. It comes back to that. Like, this is so obvious. Was Cheeto Vera's win over Sean O'Malley legitimate since Sean O'Malley suffered an injury? This is a real thing. This isn't my question. I'm pirating this from 5 other places where this conversation is going on. That is a shocking question to me. And there's some things that are so obvious in life, rhetorically, even the smartest of minds have a hard time responding to them. Why is 5 plus 7 the same as 7 plus 5? Like, the answer is so obvious that it's very tough, even for a mathematician, to answer that. First off, is something legit? What are you talking about? Legitimacy does not matter and has never mattered in sport. Is it official? That is the question. Is this up in the air? Is this under review? Is there a protest? Is this we have an official answer? Great, move on to the next. That's how it works. By the way, it's an attempt to take away from Cheeto Vera. I mean, that's the attempt, very clearly. At what point does he get the credit? That becomes the question. If you get your hand raised and it's official, it sounds like there's nothing to talk about here, but can't we back up a step further? Cheeto Vera was a 3.5 to 1 underdog. How would you like to have to get into a cage half naked in front of the world and fight another guy? I mean, O'Malley came out and he's finally said Cheeto Vera's name for the first time, I believe, ever. And all he said was, look, Vera didn't want to do this fight. We even got a history. This dates back over a year. The UFC finally made him sign the contract. Now, of course, that created head waves. Yeah, did the UFC make him sign this contract? Does Vera not want to do the fight? here I am talking to you guys about it. I have to tell you, I mean, Sean does so many things that are brilliant. I mean, he really does. Sean is starting to change it right when you think there's nowhere else you can go. You got the good guys, you got the bad guys, you got the heels, you got the baby faces. I mean, it's the oldest story ever, but every now and then, a Rock, The Rock, emerges that sits somewhere in between. You don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy, but damn, he's interesting. And damn, he's good what he does. And darn it, he's funny. Nobody ever thought there was room for a funny guy. I mean, nobody really thought there was room to get the audience to laugh. They always believed it was either make them boo or make them cheer, make them have an emotion. The Rock was the one guy that came along and goes, you know what? You know what's a really good emotion? Humor. Humor solves all problems. I'm going to come out and be funny. Now, he did a little bit of everything, but I only offer for you every now and then there's room for this guy in between. And there's really no marketing agency you could hire or PR firm you could work with or promoter you could sit down across from that's going to tell you about the in-between. It's a little bit of a blue moon, and frankly, if you're hedging a bet, don't go for it. I mean, snake eyes come up, but my goodness, it's very random. And so Sean O'Malley's one of these really interesting in-between Rock-esque guys. Now, back up to what he said. Vera refused to sign the contract, and the UFC made him. Look, I will tell you from my perspective to personalize this, I could never get a guy to respond. I could never goat a guy better, more effectively, or count on it to a higher degree than if I lied. If I came out and said I can beat this guy, he'd blow me off. If I came out and complimented him and said, that guy looks really good, he'd accept the compliment, but I wouldn't get a reaction. If I ever came out and told a lie, and it could be as simple as could be, this guy asked me for an autograph. It could be as simple as can be. I was getting a reaction. There was something about that where no matter how fierce the competitor, you talking trash or you insulting them, they had too much going on in their day. There was something about it, even if you were praising them, that they never felt like pulling you up in the loft with them. There was something about if you told a story that wasn't exactly the way that just invoked them to respond. I will have to tell you, I wasn't there, I don't know, but I don't think the UFC's in the business of making anybody sign anything. I've never heard of such a thing, but Sean wins once again. Because Sean has now told a story that has forced a reaction. There was this time, and I caught this clip on YouTube, but one of my favorite duos ever, the NWO, but before the whole NWO formed, it was just Hall and Nash. And Hall and Nash were going around and they were doing house shows. And what a house show means is there's no camera. It's a professional wrestling term. There's no camera. If you want to see the show, you have to be in the house. So while wrestling does like 52 television tapings a year, once a week, they hold 250 shows a year. So house shows is a very real thing. And a lot of times you'll travel around and you'll take on the same took on Tuesday night. So Hall and Nash go and they get beat by somebody on a Tuesday night. They go into some new town. There was no cameras. The only people that knew were in the house. They go into some new town on Wednesday. And Hall grabs the microphone and informs the building, we just wrestled these guys last night and beat them. So of course we're going to beat them again, which is not what happened. They wrestled the night before and they lost to them. So as Hall and Nash leave the arena that night, Nash turns to Hall and says, hey, you said that we beat these guys. We didn't. Like he thought that Hall had screwed up and said the wrong thing. And Hall looked at Nash and said, we're heels. Heels lie. And there's just something very compelling and interesting about it. And no part of this do I want you to lose respect for me and go, Chael's out there saying that you should lie. No, I'm saying you could be a storyteller. He's out there telling a story. Sean has a story to tell. He has a match coming up. Promotion is nothing more than storytelling. And no matter how many times you beg somebody to understand this, if the story isn't there or the story isn't compelling or the story isn't told, you don't have a promotion. There's no ability to promote it. It all has to come in from some certain angle of who, what, when, why, and where. I'm not calling Sean a liar. That's not what I'm doing. I was not there. I'm sharing with you, it would seem as though that is his version. But his version I have read on 6 different websites, of which I only go to 6 websites, and I'm sitting here talking to you about it now. I don't mean to beat the same drum, guys, but once again, Sean wins. Sugar Sean O'Malley, I've been a little surprised. Is that the right word, surprised? Because I've seen this a million times. I've been a little surprised how much people are attempting to pile on a young man who works hard, who has a dream, who then, by the way, goes and puts it online with his shirt off, his mouthpiece in front of the world against anybody who gets in there against him. I'm a little bit confused in the world of teasing somebody, how that action is deservable of being teased. Okay, let's set that aside. Okay, fight fans. We get to be anything we want, including jerks. We get to be positive. We get to be negative. I'm the first to disclose that. Doesn't mean I wasn't a little bit surprised. You've got a guy who went out there and was injured. There's a difference of being hurt and there's a difference of being injured. And I make no contention for you that was on accident or he rolled his foot on something and it was the apparatus's fault. I got no problem with saying that his opponent did it. Nothing wrong with saying Cheeto kicked him in the foot and hurt his foot, which is Cheeto's entire job, and giving him his full credit. You still have somebody who got hurt while trying to do something to his best of his ability, and by the way, pushing through it and not letting the fact that he got hurt slow him down and or stop him. It seems like a big stretch to me how that same person, Sean O'Malley, is even a candidate for teasing. But you won't win. If your intent was to hurt his feelings, you did not win. Sugar Sean came out. So, everybody keeps telling me to take my loss like a man. I don't even know what that means. I lose every day. I went to jiu-jitsu today. I was tapped out today, which means I lost. I am 12-0 in my mind. My record may say I'm 12-1. I'm 12-0 in my mind. He said, and besides, if you go back and watch the fight, I was just getting ready to beat his ass. Okay. Set that entertainment, set that piece of wonderful theater aside. Back up a second to something he said. He said, in my mind, I am 12-0. What does that mean? I'll tell you what that means. If you were an athlete specifically, but this could be advice just to a human being. But if you're an athlete specifically, we'll keep it on that. You have to be very careful what you let in your bubble. And the toughest guy I met in my life, guy that I do not question to this day, is a guy named Les Gutchess. And Les Gutchess was the champion of the world, and I was sitting in his living room. We had finished a workout. I'm sitting in his living room, looking up to a guy, and I'm on his couch. I mean, cool spot for me, right? But he did talk about something. And he talked about just that. He talked about just this topic, what O'Malley is dealing with now, in my mind. And Les had made a comment to me that you have to be very careful what you let in your bubble. There is something that you find out through this process that either has an adverse effect on the outcome, or you learn about yourself as a person, as a character. Your character issue. Who am I? And you don't like that answer. Sometimes you got to act like it didn't happen. Sometimes you have to be an actor, which includes pretending to be somebody you're not to get the result that you're after. And Les Gutchess specifically, he commented on something about